Welcome to the Leading Yourself podcast. This is your host, Carolina de Arriba. I'm an HR professional, coach, wife, mom, and above all things, a goal-getter. In this podcast, we're going to be digging into all things leadership, professional and career development, habits, and relationships. This is a podcast for those who want to become the best version of themselves, those who have big dreams and are willing to embrace the journey and put in the work to achieve them. My goal is to share with you the tools, tips, and tricks to help you in your journey. So let's dig into today's episode. Welcome to a new episode of the Leading Yourself podcast. Today, I'm super excited. I know I say this often, but today it hits differently because I have with me a great friend, Erin Dewsbury-Ribeiro, that we used to work together. Our paths have crossed many times, and she just published a new book. And since then, I'm so proud to see how she has grown and the impact that she has made in the space of allyship and anti-racism and diversity inclusion. And I'm so thrilled to have you here today, Erin.
Thank you so much for having me. I was so excited when you offered to have me on the podcast. I followed you for years after you left the organization, and I was just super happy to be part of this.
I'm super excited for today's conversation. As we get into this, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what inspired you to write your book, Dreaming in Color.
Okay, so it's a bit of a squiggly path, I'll say. I've been at my organization for 19 years now, and I started as a project manager. And then I went into HR. That's where you and I worked together. I was the manager for a training organization, learning and development. And what I think is amazing is when you can bring a passion of yours into your work. So for me, that was books. And you and I had talked about books often when we worked together. And so I brought books to work and started doing a book discussion. I called it the virtual book club. And so by doing that, after George Floyd was murdered, I started an anti-racism and allyship book discussion with another white woman in the organization. And that made the trajectory of where I am today possible, I would say. So I name her in the book. Her name is Bonnie Sherwitz. She is a phenomenal ally. So we had this anti-racism and allyship call. And typically when I did a book discussion, it was, I don't know, maybe 1, 2 maximum. You would have 10, 12 people. And we had to have 10 sessions, which was amazing, the response we had to that. And that really started me on my journey of what I would say more true allyship. And from there, I started supporting a Black-owned bookstore called Blackstone Bookstore in Cultural Center in Ypsilanti, Michigan. Started writing reviews for them. And then I got a sense of maybe I can write longer form. Maybe I can do this. It was never on my bucket list to write a book, honestly. But the more I thought about it, I'm sure most people go through this, but I had this moment of self-doubt and imposter syndrome where I thought, well, is my story really unique? Does it really make sense for me to tell this story? And I had to go through that process and say, yes, this is a unique story and it does make sense to write it. And so I really started writing in 2024. It was about a year-long process, but I had started writing content probably several years before that. So it was about a 4-year process. And then I launched it this year and I can't believe I did it. But I hope it's an inspiration for people that not only for book writing, but for, whatever you want to do. If you want to do it, you can. I really believe that you can. That's a little bit. Now I'm the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Officer for my organization. I found my passion for diversity, equity, inclusion through that and was a member of African ancestry at the organization, a business resource group, as the only non-white person. And I would say not only the only non-white person, the only non-Black person as part of that. And that was something that I think is not a typical experience for a white American. For a white person living in America to be the only from a racial perspective in the room. And that shaped a lot of my journey and what I discovered along the way about myself, but about others as well. I'll pause there. I could talk all day.
Yeah, well, I have a lot of questions for you, Erin, around all of this. And again, I'm listening to you and I'm seeing images of that point in time because we
Yeah,
were together
we were.
during George Floyd's assassination, Black Lives
Mm-hmm.
Matter, the pandemic,
Yes.
and you reference all of these in your book. Clearly, all of these events were triggers for a lot of what inspires you today.
Yeah.
Just want to say I'm just so proud of you for how long
Thank
you've come and how you found this intersection of, as you said, your passion
you. Mm-hmm.
and work and being able to make an impact in an organization and in the community through the work that you do both at work and outside of work now with
Yeah.
your book and inspiring a lot of people along the way. I know I've learned a lot from you in this space. I remember of Black Lives Matter and how
Mm-hmm.
we went through that as a team. And
Yeah.
it was this moment when you realize that you don't know what you don't know,
Yeah.
and how the only way to learn is to get closer to the people that are part of that experience, right? And that difference between empathizing with someone and
Yeah.
sympathizing with someone, because
Yeah.
at that point you can't really empathize because you've never been in the other person's shoes.
No.
Unlike, I even remember having conversations with some of our colleagues at work of what their dinner table conversations look like and
Yeah.
how different they are from the ones that happen in your house or my house. So
Yes, exactly.
I'm so excited to unpack all of this. So before we go deeper into it,
Mm-hmm.
for those who are listening that maybe don't know about your book, if you had to summarize in one sentence what your book is about, what would that be?
I've been working on my elevator pitch for it, trying to hone in on what makes sense, but I think the short description of it is how do you connect with people that you don't think that you can connect with? So oftentimes we think that maybe if somebody is from a different culture or a different race or a different gender, that you can't connect with them or you don't have much in common with them. And so how do you connect with people that you don't think that you can through curiosity, self-education, vulnerability, and empathy? You mentioned, and a lot of it comes down to empathy for me. How do you have empathy for people who aren't like you and their different experiences?
When you're telling, you're sharing your journey, a lot of stories and experiences. When you
Mm-hmm.
look back at your early career and life moments, what were the first sparks that led you towards this allyship journey? Because
Yeah,
I don't know, for me, I was reading the book and I'm like, I've seen it because I could see all those signals, but I couldn't connect them at the time, right? When you mentioned the
same.
book, for example, right? But what are, when you look back, a lot of times we don't see the meaning on things when we're in the midst of them, but then we
Yeah.
look back and we're like, oh my God, there was like breadcrumbs all the way leading me to where I am today. What were some of those breadcrumbs for you, Erin?
100%. I love the breadcrumbs reference because that's as I started looking at, once I was in African ancestry, I started looking at why am I like I am, right? And trying to figure out kind of the secret sauce of why my brain works like that. And then I started looking at back at my earlier childhood, and as an example, my best friend and next door neighbor, Jamie, I talk about her in the book. Her family is Hispanic. I was part of her family. I would be in with the family. You know, they're speaking Spanish and making Mexican food and everything. So that was like my second family growing up. And then in college I studied Japanese, and so I lived in Japan, and in the town that I lived, we were one of the only group of foreigners, non-Japanese people within that town. There were only 18 or 20 of us at the time. In college, I hung out with a bunch of Korean students, and so I would go and hang out with them and go to Korean karaoke, which is called noraebang, with them being the only non-Korean. So I realized after the fact, as I started writing the book and kind of examining, I thought, oh my gosh, I did this for myself often. And I think it was just, I had this aha moment probably in like eighth grade. So I would have been about, I don't know, 13 years old. My school where I grew up was very homogenous, it was white. Everyone looked like me, or for the most part. And I remember thinking to myself, there's got to be more than this. There's got to be more people different than me. And I just want to find that. So when I went to University of Michigan, that was a starting point for me for finding that difference. But I also worked in a Chinese restaurant during high school. in Detroit. So the family was all Chinese, so I was with them all the time in a very black neighborhood. So I think I just did it, but I didn't realize I was doing it or why I was doing it, but it came down to my curiosity of others.
I can definitely see that in you. And I didn't knew all of that, but I think you talk about it kind of on your book that who you surround yourself and what you consume has a big
Hmm.
influence in everyone's journey to allyship. You talk
Yeah.
about the importance of diversifying what you consume, whether it's books or podcasts or social media. Can you tell us a little bit about how you did that? How did you realize that
Yeah.
you maybe didn't have the diversity that you needed and wanted, and how did that look like for you, that journey of diversifying what you consume?
Yeah. So it started in probably about 2019 or 2020 when I started reading again. So I used to read as a kid a lot, and then I kind of took breaks over the years. And in 2019, I came back to it where I started reading more. And having gone through the anti-racism and allyship book discussions, being part of African ancestry, it kind of put a spotlight on what content am I reading. And so I started counting the books of white authors versus others. And I discovered that a majority of my content was consumed by people that look like me from a racial perspective. And so I wanted to shift that. So I made an intentional goal to read at least 50% of my content needed to be from people from a different race than myself. And this in the beginning I had to search, and I had to, it was a process. Now it just becomes second nature. Now if you look at my bookshelves, it's pretty different than it was in the past, because the main genre that I love is fantasy. And fantasy was very heavily influenced and represented by not just white people, but white men. And now it's shifted so much, which I'm very happy to see with Black female authors and Asian women, and the LGBTQ plus community is heavily represented. So it's been this great shift. But then I started an Instagram page called Let's Read Diversely to kind of share my journey that I was going on. And so I started following, at the time, for the most part, Black Instagrammers and this subcategory called Bookstagrammers. Basically book nerds coming together, and I use the term nerd lovingly because I identify as one, but like these book fanatics that are reading different content and sharing. But then it started, I say that AI picked up positively on my desire to diversify. So instead of like honing me in and keeping me in one homogenous space, it really opened my eyes where it started making recommendations of, oh, if you follow this Black Instagrammer, what about this Black deaf rapper or this Black deaf dancer? And I thought, I didn't know that's possible, right? You don't know what you don't know, right? You said it earlier.
Yeah.
So I thought, I didn't know it was possible to be deaf or hard of hearing and a rapper, or deaf and hard of hearing and a dancer. So I started following those two. And then it opened up into the broader deaf and hard of hearing community. And then it started identifying people within LGBTQ plus community and the indigenous community. And so as you look at my page and my search, it's so different. I just started a new one for my book called Dreaming in Color of the Book. And the AI hasn't picked up on it yet. So if you look at that, when you press the search and it shows you content. So I'm training the AI right now by following some of the other ones that I follow on Let's Read Diversely. But you have to be intentional about it. If you just coast and let things go as they are, it'll keep you in a homogenous bubble.
Yes. I
That's what our
mean,
brains
we
like.
talk about it, we both have been in HR, and we talk about managers hiring people that look like them.
Yeah,
And the same happens with what we consume, right? All
absolutely.
the algorithms just feed you more of what you already have. So if you
Yeah.
don't start breaking that cycle,
Hmm.
you don't get to see all that is out there. And actually,
Yeah.
as I was reading the book, Erin, I went to my Instagram and I'm like, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
What the composition of the accounts that I follow, right? And
Yeah.
I definitely have some work to do to diversify what I consume more broadly. So thank you for that inspiration.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I can't not say this. You mentioned your love for books.
Mm-hmm.
If I learned one thing since I know Erin, since you picked back on reading in 2019, is never compete with Erin as to who reads more books in Goodreads, because you will lose. Every
There are
year,
some that
I
beat me.
will
There are
lose.
definitely some that beat me, but I do read a lot. I picked up from you though, Carolina. We talked, I remember we were in a coffee chat in the main hallway and we were talking about how we read, right? And you had shared with me that you would often listen to the book and read the book at the same time. I talk about it in my book. And that was like the biggest game changer for me because I think some people do it because maybe the language they're reading in isn't their first language. And so to make that connection. Some people are doing it. I've learned people that are dyslexic will do it because then it makes what they're seeing on the page make sense in their brain because they're hearing it. So I do clarify now. When I say I read, I'm doing air quotes for the podcast. When I say I read about 100 books a year, I think I'm at 81 right now, so I might hit the 100 mark. That's been about my average for the last 5 years. When I say that, what I mean is I consume 100 books a year. And so I clarify that because I think I never want to make it a competition for people. I want people to, hopefully, if they want to get into reading or whatever thing that they want to do, I hope it inspires you. You can build up a habit slowly over time and then it just becomes part of your daily routine. But I listen to books, I read the physical books, I often read and listen. That's my favorite way to do it, especially if you're listening to a book from a different culture. You can hear the accent, you can kind of be immersed into that culture that way, which I love to do. But I read the ebook. I say I'm the book industry's like favorite consumer because I buy often for one book, I'll buy all mediums, which is I spend way too much money on it, but I hope it inspires people and not makes them feel a way negatively about what they're doing. But I used to like doom scroll exclusively and watch a ton of makeup videos and which I still do, but I repurposed my time. And so that's my biggest hint to anybody is, and it doesn't have to be reading. Not everybody likes reading, but whatever it is for you that you want to get into, you have the time. You
Yes.
just have to repurpose. I have 3 kids. I have a full-time job. Like, you find the time for
I
the thing
love
that you
that,
want to
Erin,
incorporate.
because I feel the same way. A lot of times people ask me, how do you do the podcast and your job and your kids? And I'm like, well, don't ask me what shows are playing in Netflix because I don't watch Netflix, right? I use my time to consume podcasts and books and work on my own podcast. It's a matter
Yeah.
of, setting priorities and making the time for the things that you value. And in your case, I know it's reading. And back to the listening and reading. I
Mm-hmm.
know in your book you talk about that recently you got tested and diagnosed with ADHD, and
Yes.
I was reading that and I'm like, I think I should. I think the reason why this reading and listening works so well for me is because
Yeah.
I have a degree of ADHD somewhere, because it's so hard for me to focus. If I'm
Yeah.
reading, I get distracted by noise. If I'm listening, I don't know what to do with the rest of me. I can just sit still and listen to a book unless I'm driving. That is my prime
Yes.
time for listening to
Same.
audiobooks.
Same. That's the reason that I talk so openly about things like my ADHD diagnosis. I talk about my family's very neurospicy, I say, because we have depression, anxiety, ADHD, bipolar. I mean, we're kind of covered across the board, and I didn't realize I had the family's ADHD until about 2 years ago in my late 40s. And what I find amazing, I talk about it in the book, Someone Unnamed, but I think what I'm finding is as women in their is go through or start going through menopause or perimenopause, which is another thing we don't talk about much, there is this link of diagnosis of ADHD because they could figure it out enough over the years and mask enough, and then once perimenopause hits or menopause hits, it's like all bets are off. in your brain. I'm going to post on LinkedIn a little bit later because this morning I was getting my coffee ready to have this podcast with you, Carolina. And it's one of those machines where you have to turn it's like an espresso machine. So you turn it and then you have to stop it, right? I walk away to do a load of laundry and I come back and it's like overflowing all over the place. And I was like, this is the best representation I can post about ADHD plus perimenopause/menopause because it's just wild. And a woman came up to, I've had several people come up to me when I talk about it and I talk about how it shows up for me or how it shows up for my daughter. And people say, oh my gosh, that sounds so familiar. And I didn't want to get the diagnosis. I'm not medicated. People in my family are for that. And my mom often jokes and says, once I finished the book, she said, I don't think you have the family's ADHD. And I said, why do you say that? She said, you finished a book. And I said, that's the hyperfocus. So hyperfocus is a type of ADHD, and I have hyperfocus and impulsivity. Those are my two types. And I said, no, it's about hyperfocus. I got to hyperfocus on the thing that I love, which is DEI and allyship and everything. And she said, oh, I didn't know that was an aspect of. We all think it's the inattentiveness, but if you can hyperfocus on the thing you love, you're unstoppable.
You are.
Yes.
And talking about allyship, because your book is all about your journey as an ally, in your words, what is allyship and what is not? Because we should have started there.
Yeah, probably.
Probably, right? But I think
Probably.
it would be good for everyone to listen, like what it is. I think a lot of us have an idea of what it is,
Yeah.
different versions of what it is and how it looks like. But based on your own experience, your journey, in your work through this book, how would you define allyship?
So for me, it is based on action. So it's coming together for a group to support a group of other people. So typically it's for someone that is different than you. And for me, it came down to the actions. So if I say allyship is nothing without action. Because if you're just saying things but not doing, then it's not really true allyship, I think. The other thing that I learned along the way is you can't identify yourself as an ally. So if you're hoping to be an ally, going and saying, "Oh, I'm an ally." I mean, I'm doing it, but but I was deemed that by specifically within the Black community. And so that was something. So it's something that is a gift given to you, that title of an ally. And I think that was something that I didn't know that. Right? I didn't even know before I started all of this, I didn't even know the word allyship. It's still quite uncommon, I think, for people to understand it or know it. So when I say an allyship journey about the book subtitle, I kind of see this pause in people, or they'll kind of, and then if they feel comfortable enough, they'll say, well, what is that? And so it's just, for me, it was down to self-education, right? So learning on my own, because I grew up close to Detroit, because I worked in Detroit. I always appreciated Black culture and the Black experience, but I thought I knew more than I did, right? And then I started learning and I thought, oh my gosh, I knew nothing. I didn't learn anything of significance in my school. Things like Black Wall Street or Juneteenth. I didn't know what Juneteenth was until 2020, probably. So there were a lot of things I didn't know. And I think that was the starting point for me, is if you want to start supporting a community, understanding not only the trials and tribulations and the history and the pain, but also the joy and the beauty and the kind of this holistic picture. That for me was really important as I started that journey. But also recognizing, without defensiveness, what I didn't know, which was basically nothing. In hindsight.
Well, if you didn't knew anything, imagine the rest of us, right? Like, I think for me, that was a big realization as I was reading your book and just remembering a lot of the things we lived together during that time of, I think I, like you, had this realization, I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we think we know, but having the humility and the vulnerability to say, I don't know, that is a hard step to take.
Yeah.
but probably the one that unlocks everything that comes afterwards.
That's a great way to say that. That is a great way to put that, because I feel like that was it, is when you humble yourself enough to say, I didn't know about that. Let me go learn some more. But also I think when you do the work and you show your intent, then it comes down to people are more willing to share their stories. So you talked about it before, the people that we worked with, one of the biggest things I would learn on the outside, I would watch shows or read books. But when it comes down to somebody that you love and care about in your organization or a friend of yours, and they're open to share their story with you of concerns that they have, or, what that experience is like being them. So one of the things that I really hit home for me was conversations that Black parents have to have with their kids, especially boys, right? When they're driving, when they start to drive. And at that time, my daughter was just starting to drive. And I thought back to when I was a kid, did my parents ever have to tell me, like, keep your hands on the wheel, turn the music down? No. As a white person, no, I never had that. I was given the extended the, I guess, opportunity to explain myself. And so to understand that when my Black friends, when their kids are starting to drive, the anxiety that induces, right, that something could happen and while they're on the road, or something like that, then that empathy kicks in, right? I didn't experience it. I don't experience it with my kids, but if somebody I care about is experiencing that, tapping into my
Leave it
empathy.
through them and their
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
But talking about vulnerability and the curiosity, I'm sure that in your journey, especially now as the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for the company you work for,
Hmm.
you encounter a lot of leaders that want to do the right thing, but
Yeah,
they're scared. They're
yep,
like, I don't want to ask because I don't know how to react to what might come, or I don't want to
hmm,
say the wrong thing. And I think a lot of times we are our worst enemy in this allyship journey, right? We are the ones who stop ourselves, who
yes,
put a ceiling on top of our heads when it comes to just unpacking everything and being
mm,
curious and showing vulnerability, because it comes from a good place, right? The
yeah,
right intention of not wanting to say the wrong thing that might offend someone else or create a conflict. But what is your advice if someone is like, this sounds great, but I don't know, I want to, but I'm scared and I don't know
yeah,
what to say, and I don't know what is going to come back and how to
mm,
react to that? What would be your advice for those people?
yeah. Well, what I've learned from talking to people from who weren't born and raised in the US, I think the United States is a very complex culture to come into. My husband included is not from here originally, and I think that there are two things about the US that I've learned from the external perspective. One, we're very politically correct. So what you say matters and how you say it, and people, this whole idea of cancel culture, where you say the wrong thing and then you're canceled, which you're right is very scary, and then people are just not going to say anything, right? But then also we're very litigious here in the US, and so we quite quick to sue somebody if something is wrong. And okay, so if you're somebody coming in from the outside into this country, I can understand why you would be fearful to say something. So what I recommend is say something like, gosh, I didn't know a lot about that. If someone asks you a question, or if you're in a conversation with somebody and they are talking about someone, or ask a question and you don't know much about that culture, you can say, gosh, I don't know a lot about that, but I would love to learn more. Would you meet with me after for a coffee or something? Can we talk? I would love to learn. That is so much better in my mind than trying to fumble your way through a response, because people see through that, right? And I think it is very endearing when, especially a leader, a high level leader, says, I don't know. And it's a hard thing to do, right? As leaders, I think we're taught, especially generationally. I think Gen X and the baby boomers were taught that we have to be infallible as leaders. We have to know all the answers. We have to be all knowing. You can't. You literally can't, right? And that's okay. And I think that's the big shift for me was it's okay you can't know everything about every culture or every human that you meet. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. And I think that's sometimes a hard piece, right? I know for me, I remember, that 2019, 2020 timeframe.
Yeah.
I was I was so scared. I was scared to say the wrong thing, but I was
Yeah.
also so scared to admit that I didn't know,
Yeah.
because I thought others expect me to know because of the role that I had. People expected me to know things that I didn't know. Once you get through that bump, I think everything becomes easier. But it's hard to overcome. It's really
We're
hard
so
to overcome.
conditioned. We're so conditioned as leaders that is what is expected of us, I think. And I'm hoping that we get to a place where leaders understand, no, you can't. And it's like I feel like I'm giving permission. That sounds wrong, but it's like I'm giving permission to them to, you don't need to know everything when it comes to people, right? Because the other thing I learned along the way from our black high level leaders, Greg, I name him in the book. His name is Greg Gums. He said, so I was put into a reverse mentoring position with him. So from African ancestry, we partnered with people from the organization, high level leaders. He was the only black leader at the time at that level, and I was the only white person as part of the steering committee and the leadership. I was vice president at the time. And so they thought it would be an interesting pairing that the white woman was mentoring the black leader that we had. And he said, just because I'm black doesn't mean I know everything about being black. And I thought, what a phenomenal statement for him to make. And so I learned, just because I'm, a woman doesn't mean I know your experience as a woman, Carolina. Just because I'm white doesn't mean I know the experience of every other white American. Or just because I have ADHD doesn't mean that I know the experience of every other person with ADHD. It's very personal to them. And then it comes down to also the intersections of our identities. So, I'm white and American and a woman, you're Spanish and a woman and, American also, right? So there's all this like complexity of people that if two people look the same or similar, you can't assume that they are,
And assume, yeah,
because they're not.
they're not. I want to switch gears a little bit, and I have to talk about this because one of my favorite books, probably among the top 5 books, is Atomic Habits. And I
Yeah.
think I read that book for the first time alongside with you,
Yes.
and that triggers some of these book clubs that you reference in
Yes.
your book. But I love how you took some of the concepts in the book to talk about how to build habits to be
Yes.
an ally. Can you
Yeah.
speak to, a lot of times we think allyship is about what we think or our beliefs, which, yes, is at the foundation. But to your point, allyship is about action
Yes.
and the way we show up, and habits help us in how we show up in a consistent way. Can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about the role that habits have played in your own journey and how it can help others that are maybe going in this journey to become an ally?
Yeah. Um, so yeah, we do have that book in common. It's one of my most highly recommended to people just in general, right? Because I think we get overwhelmed by the idea of starting something and we kind of focus on the finish line and we think, oh, that's too much. I don't know if I can really do that. And so it comes down to for me, it was part of my book journey where I built it into my daily routine and became a habit that way, but also showing up for other people. Or, you might think at the beginning of an allyship journey, can I do this? Am I going to do enough? But starting small and doing small things, right? So I put up during the pandemic, have you ever heard of a little free library? You might have. Sometimes they're in front of schools or in neighborhoods, in front of stores. They're little libraries that people put books into and you can take them out. So how did I start? I put a little free library in my front yard and I started putting diverse books in there. But then it grows into something bigger, right? So you start these little habits and you start small. gain the confidence, and then, it gets easier with time, and then it just becomes part of your second nature. Has it showed up like that for you too? I mean, I know you love that book
Absolutely.
also.
I think that things that at one time, even when we read the book for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
I remember one of the things I was working on at that time as a habit was getting my workout in the mornings,
Yes.
being more active.
Mm-hmm.
And, now 6 years later, like I work out 6 days a week and I feel weird the day that I don't work out. It has
Yeah.
become part of who I am, of my identity.
Yes.
And it all started with reading Atomic Habits and saying, this is something I want to work on. That was super hard, that I had tried in so many ways and I couldn't, until it became this habit that now is ingrained in my identity, right? And I think
Yes.
that's the ultimate expression of that habit, is when it becomes part of who you are and it's
Absolutely.
just second nature.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that, because now in my organization, I'm known as the book person. You want a recommendation for a book, you come to me. You'll probably be overwhelmed with my response because I have a lot of thoughts about it, but that's my identity in my organization and with my friends and everything. But I see you when you're, and this idea of habit stacking, I think, is also good, and I see that as an example that you do, where you're watching something, you're learning something on your treadmill, or you're working on your treadmill. So you're doing this where you're doing two things that you are passionate about and you love: learning, growing, developing leadership activities, plus that working out. So you're living that book right now.
It's definitely one of the books, together with the 7 Habits of Highly
Oh
Effective
yeah.
People, that I
Yeah.
always recommend
Yeah.
to everyone. They're my top two go-to books.
Yeah, absolutely. My new one is called The Power of Mattering. Have you heard of this one, by Zach
I have
Mercurio?
not, but I will
Oh my
add it
gosh,
to my list.
got it. Because this for me, it just came out in 2025. This for me is so powerful when it comes to understanding your people, which is, one of the big things that I find so important as we're looking at diversity and we're looking at how do we make people feel included. It talks about the idea that if you treat people insignificant, they will act insignificant. If you know what makes your people tick, if you understand what motivates them, what gets them out of bed, what passion projects they want to do in your organization, you will tap into something. And that was for me. I mean, you saw me on that journey where I used to be a project manager. I loved being a project manager. I was good at it. And then I came into learning and development and tapped a little bit more into my passion and what I love to do. And I did these side projects that got me more fueled for that. And then now I get to do what I love every single day and get paid for it, right? I'm living in my values and my passion and my purpose. And so if you can tap into that for people, they will go above and beyond. My productivity is through the roof. Like, I don't burn out. If you can tap into that and see what that is for people, it's a powerful, powerful thing. So that's my, with Atomic Habits, those are my two recommended
I
books.
definitely have to read this book.
It's amazing. You'll love it. I know you will.
I want to ask you something. You talked about this on the book, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious on maybe expanding on what you wrote on your book as well. The journey to allyship and anti-racism, it's a hard one,
Yeah.
because progress, it's always slower than you want. It can
Yeah.
be very frustrating. The work can feel really heavy.
Mm-hmm.
How do you stay optimistic when in the midst of all of this? Because,
Yeah.
it can be very easy to say, okay, I just throw the towel, I give up, there's
Yeah.
no way I can make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
um, but you have been very resilient in your own journey, and you have kept going. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering, and in an optimistic way, right? You
Yeah.
always, when I think about you, you are the person who sees the glass half full versus half
Absolutely.
empty. How do you stay optimistic when progress is slow and work is it's heavy and hard?
Yeah. Great question. And I'm fortunate enough. So I'm a Gallup Clifton Strengths certified coach. And in my top 5, I have positivity as one of my strengths or talents. And
I
so I
can
tap into
definitely
that,
see that.
right? I mean, I always felt glass half full. I see the silver lining in things. And I completely understand that when things get hard. This is hard work that I'm doing and I choose to do. And what I think is so amazing and what I've said is often, and it comes down also to atomic habits again, right? I have this vision of where I want my organization to be, where I want, the world to be. Are we there? No, we're so far from there, right? In my mind. But when I have a great conversation with somebody in a day, and I changed something for them, that keeps me going to the next ones. And it does feel slow progress. It does feel like, okay, well, I changed something, or I hopefully changed something for this one person today or these two people today. But in my mind, that expands, right? That is, they then talk to somebody and it
The
grows
ripple
outward,
effect.
right? It's a great ripple effect. And so I figure if I am doing those little things, they do add up, right? And they multiply, which is wonderful. But I try not to focus on the we're so far from where I want to be, but also the community that you surround yourself with and the people that you can call in a moment of tough times. So in the book, I talk about the power of 8 minutes that I learned from my friend Allie from Simon Sinek, which is, do you have someone who you can call and say, I need 8 minutes? And that's whatever your code is to say, I'm struggling, I need you. So there's a friend of mine, Janine, who I met through a DE&I program. And she, in the beginning of the year this year, I was really struggling. I was feeling very not optimistic. I was not tapping into it. And I was crying, and I called her and I said, I need you to talk me off the ledge. I need you to bring me back because I got to do this work. And she said, I'll call you as soon as I'm done with this meeting. And she called me back and we cried and then we laughed. And so if you have a strong community that you can tap into when it's hard, you will get through. And that for me has been surrounding myself with people who have the same values, are doing the same work, have the same purpose, and living in that has been very motivating for me to keep going. And the other thing is, the reason that I keep doing it is because I have the luxury to back out of it. As a white person in America, I have the luxury to say, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. It's too hard. And for me, that also fuels me and motivates me to keep going because there are people that don't have that opportunity or luxury that I have to be afforded. And so just by being born into the body I was. And that for me is very, I don't know, it gets me out of bed every day to do the work more.
Yeah. That is so inspiring, Erin. And I can agree more with you. I think the power of community is
Mhm.
priceless. When you're pushing for something, for a purpose, having people that are like-minded with similar
Mhm.
values, that are in the same journey as you and aiming for the same things. And as I was listening to you, this quote, and I don't know who said it, I think it's Maya Angelou, but I'm not
Mhm.
sure to say, you might not change the world, but you will change someone's world.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that is, when I was listening to you, I can see that happening. A lot of times we all have this ambition to change the world, and
Mhm.
none of us can alone, but we
Yes.
can
Yes. Yes.
contribute
Yes.
to that, right? And we can certainly change someone's world. And
Yes.
that has that trickle effect, that ripple effect that you were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I think also the people that are watching interactions or, overhearing something. So, like at the gym yesterday, I was talking about perimenopause or menopause, and I'm in it with a woman in my neighborhood. And this woman overheard me and she said, are you talking about menopause? And I said, yeah. She said, oh my God, I am going through it. She said, so you're doing, I started hormone replacement therapy. And she's like, what is that like? And she said, I just want to thank you because you're talking about the stuff that we don't talk about. And I think that's the thing is she overheard a conversation. She kind of invited herself in, which I appreciated. Now I know her. I'll see her at the gym. We'll talk. I'll share with her, what's happening with me. That's the thing is people are watching what you're doing. And so also from, if you have kids or if you have kids, maybe they're not your own, but in your circle, they're paying attention. they're paying attention and they're watching. And so, I talk about in the book about my kids. One of them I thought was not paying attention at all. Oh, he was paying attention. He's paying attention, and he shows me that by little things he says, ideas he shares with me. And so that idea of your words and your actions matter. And Maya Angelou talks about the idea that, people will remember how you made them feel. And I just hope that I make somebody feel good in a day. And if that's what I did that day, that is a good day.
Yeah. I can relate to that so much.
Yeah.
So much. As I want to be mindful of your time, so as I have so many more questions for you, and I hope we continue this conversation offline. But
I would love to.
talking about conversations, what conversations do you hope your book sparks in families, in workplaces, teams, communities? Like, what is your hope for your book? What kinds of conversations are you hoping that are sparked as a result of people reading your book?
That's a great and a very big question. I hope that it helps people connect with others. That is my ultimate goal, is connection of humans. And if the one thing that they take away is to be curious about somebody else and not to make assumptions about who they are and their journey and their story, I think that would be phenomenal, right? So I had moments where I made assumptions about people and I was wrong. And so finding
I'm guilty of that too.
oh my gosh, I just, I've stepped in it sometimes. And I think what's then important for me is saying, ooh, I got that one wrong. But finding out from them in particular, I think is really key. And so just being curious about somebody else. Because the other thing is, for me, I had to go through a journey of understanding that in my space in diversity, equity, and inclusion, I need to listen to all voices, even those that I don't necessarily agree with. I need to be curious and listen and understand why, because I wouldn't be an effective DE&I officer, or I wouldn't be doing my job if I say, well, you don't agree with exactly what I agree with, you're out, right? And so that idea of, especially for those that we think we don't have anything in common with, or we fundamentally do not agree with each other, I had to go through that process where I had to say, I really need to listen to everyone, right? Because everybody brings value. Everybody's perspective is and important for them. So why is it important for them? That, I think, if I can get more people to do that, because I went through that journey, I'm still working on it, right? It's not, the journey never ends. I'm still working on that for myself. But that was a process that I had to go through, that to understand that everybody's opinion and perspective and life experiences are valuable to know and understand.
Such a powerful takeaway, and that was clearly throughout your book. And I mean, you're one of the people that does that really well. And
Thank you.
for me, I know it's a lot of times it's hard because I'm very much result oriented person and
Right.
getting fast, and a lot of times you feel like if you stop to listen to everyone, it slows you down.
Yeah.
And like you, I've learned that it might temporarily,
Yes.
but it fuels you to speed up down the road. and
100%.
and it's something I'm constantly working on, because
Yeah.
my productive, efficient self comes in, and it's a battle. It's a
Yeah.
battle.
You have to be intentional about it, because
Yeah.
with how you are wired, you got to fight against it, but you're doing it. And I think that's the important thing. And one of our leaders shared recently in a panel discussion the same thing, hearing all the different voices. Yes, it takes time, but then the results are so much better, right? And so you do have to take that time, but it'll come and it'll be phenomenal results.
One last question, Erin, and
Yeah.
this one is really a loaded question, but
Oh boy.
what's your hope for the world 10 years from now when it
Oh my
comes to
God.
inclusion, belonging, and allyship?
That is a very big question. I really hope, similar to what I said just a couple of minutes ago, I really hope that people feel that they belong somewhere. And that is and that they matter. Back to the book that I recommended, The Power of Mattering, that they feel that they can show up as themselves, that their voices are heard, that they feel that their voices are valued and their contributions matter in the workplace and otherwise. I mean, for people showing up at school or showing up at a community event or, anything. I just hope that we have a better understanding of each other and aren't so guarded. There's a lot of divisiveness right now, and that is very hard to watch. And so when I was thinking about, when my book should come out, I made a big push to have it come out this year because I think there are a lot of misunderstandings that people have. And I think if we can get beyond that, hopefully 10 years down the road, we're having less misassumptions, confusions about people, more connectedness, less dividedness.
That is so beautiful. I wish your vision comes true much earlier than 10 years from now.
I hope less than 10 years.
Yes.
I would love it in, sooner than that, but we're going to
It takes time. The work in this space takes time. But I think it's like a bamboo plant. It takes 6 years for it to come off the ground and then starts growing. And I think
wow, I didn't know that.
A lot of people has done a lot of work over the years. And I think there's going to be this inflection point where we start to see that everywhere. Yeah. And I think we're starting to see it, but we live in a very divided and polarized world today. And the pace of change never been so fast. And I think it all complicates everything. But I do hope your vision comes true.
I'm seeing little pockets of it where, especially with mental health topics, I'm seeing in my organization, people are sharing things that they never shared before. They're sharing openly that they have dyslexia or they have ADHD or they're autistic or they have ADHD, which is a combination of autism and ADHD. People are sharing that with their names attached to it, which even when we were working together 3 years ago, 4 years ago, that was not happening. And so I do see this shift. I see people feeling more comfortable to, this is how I function. So one thing that I say at work is ADHD, my ADHD brain hates email, hates it. I do not work well in email. Now my search game is super duper strong. I can search through email and find, because my brain has some connection of, well, this word, and then I'll find it. But if you need to reach me, Teams me or ping me or chat me, whatever, because likely I'll see it and then I'll respond to you back. But there are people in my organization who hate Teams or messages or whatever, they need it in email. My brain says, ew, why? Because I don't like it. But making that extra little effort to say, well, what did they like? So I will email them even though I don't like it. And they in turn will message me because they know that's how I communicate better. And that not necessarily has anything to do with ADHD or, any of the neurodivergencies. It's just how do you communicate with somebody? You can ask anybody that, right? Up, down, or otherwise. So those kind of things, I'm seeing this shift, and that gives me a lot of hope and taps into my positivity to keep doing it.
Erin, it's been such a privilege to have you here. I'm so proud of you for everything that you're doing. I'm so proud for your book. I loved it. As I said, you took me on a trip back in time and remembering a lot of good times that we lived together and a lot of people that we shared in our network that have inspired both of us. So it was, I want to thank you for that. It was amazing. And for those listening, if you haven't grabbed a copy, you can grab one at Amazon. We'll put the link on the show notes of today's podcast episode, as well as Erin's Instagram account, so you can connect with her. But Erin, thank you so much for your time, for your work, for your resilience, for being such a role model and an inspiration. It's been great to talk to you today.
Thank you, Carolina. Thanks for having me on the podcast. It was great to reconnect with you, and I hope we do it more often.
Okay, my friend, that's all I've got for you today. But before you go, 2 quick reminders. Number 1, if we're not already friends on Instagram, let's get connected. You can find me as Leading Yourself Podcast. Number 2, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am incredibly grateful that you're in this journey with me. I want to leave you with one last thought. I want to remind you that you're destined for more and that every step that you take brings you closer to becoming that best version of yourself. Embrace each day as a chance to learn, grow, and chase your dreams. The world needs you to shine brightly, so go out and show up fully and authentically. Take care, and I'll see you next time.